Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Kyle and Claire toast revenge after she throttles Audra, and Jack gambles by encouraging her to steal the AI, and in the echoing, chandelier-lit dining room of the Abbott manse, tension crackled like static as Kyle sat hunched over the glowing blue light of his laptop, eyes scanning accelerated reports of offshore holdings, encrypted data transfers, and emergency asset migration protocols while Diane hovered behind him like a frantic storm cloud. She demanded an update, her voice tight with dread, and Kyle told her that while Jabot's assets were being rapidly shifted into protected digital havens, there was still no sign that Victor had launched whatever devastating assault they were bracing for. Diane admitted she could barely sleep. Every night Victor haunted her dreams, clawing his way into her subconscious and whispering promises of corporate annihilation, and the thought of Jabot falling, again, sent tremors through her. But Kyle steadied her, reminding her that the Abbotts have rebuilt before, that loss wasn't fatal, only temporary, and that as long as they stayed unified, they could endure anything. Diane softened, touched by how much like Jack he sounded, and after they reaffirmed that Victor would never take them down, she tried coaxing him away from the computer to join her and Jack for a drink, but Kyle confessed he was meeting Claire. Diane's sly smile almost escaped her lips as she noted how his tone had changed regarding Claire, and Kyle finally admitted that maybe, just maybe, things were shifting for the better. Meanwhile, across town at Society, Holden perched at the bar, tapping his phone in frustration as he tried to leave Kane yet another message, attempting to put out fires lit by rumors tearing through Arabesque like wildfire. When Claire drifted in, Holden's expression brightened, and he invited her to join him, but she politely declined, explaining Kyle was on his way, and Holden immediately sensed something different between them since LA. Claire insisted it wasn't about what happened with Audra, it was about everything he wasn't telling her, how his secrecy around his past with Audra stretched months longer than the neat little story he fed her. Holden accused her of looking for distance, but Claire countered that trust wasn't optional for her. Before the argument could settle, Audra slithered up between them like a viper, venom dripping from her voice as she snapped at Claire to keep her nose out of her life. Audra declared Claire's entire worldview was twisted because her aunt raised her to be an accomplice in evil and labeled Claire as the biggest criminal in the room, sneering that Holden was probably using her for money. Claire fired back with precision, listing Audra's failed romances one by one, carving into her insecurities, reminding her she had no job, no stability, and nothing to stand on. Audra snapped, her hand lashing out across Claire's face. For a moment Claire stood still, shock flashing across her features, but then she lunged, her hand snapping around Audra's windpipe with a fury that was cold, precise, and utterly merciless. Audra's eyes bulged as she clawed at Claire's fingers, gasping soundlessly until Holden, shouting her name, grabbed Claire's arms and pried her off. Claire jerked back, breathing hard, fire burning in her eyes. Just then, Kyle entered and Claire, still trembling with adrenaline, grabbed his arm and pulled him out the door without explanation. Inside, Audra stumbled, gripping her neck, insisting Claire was homicidal, but Holden shut her down, reminding her she threw the first blow and intentionally provoked Claire. Audra snarled that everyone loved to coddle little Claire and accused Holden of falling in line like the rest, but Holden fired back that she'd just given Claire even more incentive to dig up everything Audra had desperately been trying to hide. Audra rubbed her throat anxiously, muttering that if Claire wanted a war, she'd have one, even though Holden could see fear flickering beneath her fury. Meanwhile at the athletic club, Jack found Nikki ending a tense voicemail to Victor. He teased her about the mustache's endless crises, but Nikki was too on edge to rise to the bait. She confessed she felt useless, trapped in the dark while LA spiraled out of control. Jack admitted he missed the fragile peace their families had briefly shared, but insisted Victor could never maintain peace because hating him was as essential to Victor's existence as oxygen. When Jack implied Victor was responsible for Arabesque's collapse, Nikki didn't deny it, and Jack took that moment to confide their entire plan to her, that Jabot had intentionally crumbled from public view in order to shield itself from a targeted digital strike. Nikki was horrified, calling it suicide, lamenting that she wished she could pull the AI technology out of Victor's hands before he destroyed everyone with it. Her words sparked something electric behind Jack's eyes, but before he could explore it, Diane stormed in, displeased to find her husband whispering with a Newman. Nikki fled immediately. Diane reprimanded Jack for trusting the enemy's wife and warned he may have just handed Victor the crack he needed. Before they could finish the argument, Kyle and Claire walked in, still flushed from the chaos at society, and Jack and Diane, watching them, agreed they looked more like co-conspirators than a budding romance. But Jack insisted that if Nikki followed through, they could be miles ahead of Victor. At their table, Claire unloaded everything to Kyle, how Audra treated her like a punching bag, how she'd snapped, how she'd finally lost control. Kyle listened, jaw tightening, wishing he could erase Audra from their lives, but acknowledging she had no job, no allies, no position of influence, nothing to leverage. Claire's eyes glinted with something darker, something hungry, as she leaned forward and proposed they work together to finally take Audra down for good. Audra had a criminal record, secrets she'd buried deep, skeletons she'd hoped no one would resurrect. Claire vowed that she wanted Audra to know exactly who was responsible for dismantling her life piece by piece. Kyle hesitated only for a second before agreeing, they would do it together. And as their glasses clinked, quietly, dangerously, with a subtle, intoxicating thrill of revenge, neither of them noticed Jack in the background, watching them with growing calculation, already considering the unthinkable, encouraging Claire to steal Victor's AI to strike at the mustache before he could destroy Jabot, not yet realizing the explosive chain reaction that one gamble, combined with Claire and Kyle's newfound alliance, was destined to ignite. Kyle and Claire toast revenge after she throttles Audra, and Jack gambles by encouraging to steal the AI. In the dining room at the Abbott manse, Kyle is joined by his mother as he looks over the latest reports. She wants an update. He explains that company assets are being moved, but there is still no sign that an attack has been launched. Diane remains determined to get the dirt they need to take Victor down. She admits she's hardly been able to sleep since this started. Victor is in her nightmares and has her blood boiling. The thought of the damage losing Jabot could do to Jack terrifies her. Kyle reminds her that the company has been lost before. All they can do is focus on what is immediate and do the best they can. If they lose everything, they will rebuild as a family. Diane loves how much he sounds like his father. After they agree that Victor will never get the better of them, she asks him to pull himself away from his computer for a drink with his parents. He explains he's meeting Claire. His mother can hardly stifle a smile at that, and he admits they might be moving in a positive direction. Holden breaks up a battle between Claire and Audra. Holden is sitting at the bar in society, leaving a message for Kane and wondering if there is anything he can do to squash the rumors about Arabesque. He's happy to see Claire drift in and tries tempting her to join him. She's going to have to take a rain check on that. Kyle will be joining her for a drink. Holden admits that something feels different between them since they returned from LA. She explains it isn't because of what he did with Audra, it's about what she senses he's not telling her. Trust is a big deal to her. She's not judging what Holden did in the past, only deceiving her in the present. He suggests she's looking for an excuse to get distance from him. Claire admits that the story he told her doesn't justify how secretive he has been about his past with Audra for months. Claire Holden. As they start to argue the point, Audra pops up between them and barks at Claire to get her nose out of her life. She can understand why Claire always expects the worst of everyone, as her aunt trained her to be an evil sidekick. She reminds Claire she's the biggest criminal in the room and suggests Holden is only playing her for money. Claire shoots back that Audra has failed in all her relationships. She lists the failures and rubs in her face that she has no job. Audra loses it and smacks her. As Claire recovers from the shock, Audra claims that was just a test. Claire runs a test of her own and grabs Audra's windpipe, choking her until Holden manages to pull them apart. No sooner has Kyle walked in than Claire rushes him out the door. Audra rails that Claire is homicidal. Holden reminds her she goaded her into it with insults and even assaulted her. Audra thinks that he's falling into line to fawn over little Claire like everyone else. He points out that she just gave Claire more reason to dig into everything that she's been trying to hide. It's a mystery to him why she can't stay out of Claire's way. Rubbing her neck and worrying about bruises, she says that if Claire wants a war, that's what she's going to get. Hold on, Audra. Jack confides in Nikki. Jack wanders into the athletic club and catches the tail end of a message Nikki is leaving for Victor. He gets a few digs in about his old enemy. Nikki is clearly on edge. She worries about what is really happening in LA and wonders if she should fly back. The family is always telling her that she's their backbone and then leaving her in the dark. It's insulting that people aren't frank with her. Nikki Jack. They miss the peace between the families, but Jack is sure that Victor could never have kept it. Hating him is as basic to Victor's life as breathing. When he brings up what's happened to Arabesque, he adds he's certain that her husband is behind sucking it dry. She doesn't deny it, so he reminds her that she offered to help protect Chabot. Taking her into his confidence, he explains that they have already taken drastic measures to protect the company from a cyber attack. That means basically crumbling from public view. That sounds like certain death to her. Nikki admits that her husband did use the AI against Kane and she wishes she could take it away from him. This inspires Jack, but before they can get into it, Diane arrives. She's not thrilled to see them together, and the Newman abruptly takes off. Diane thinks Jack made a mistake. Jack and his wife sit and he explains that Nikki admitted to Victor's role in Arabesque's demise. He also admits he told Nikki their defense strategy. Diane is not amused and worries that confiding in the wife of their enemy could cost them everything. Their son comes in with Claire, but they decide to get a table of their own. The parents watch them talk, and it looks more like they are conspiring than reconciling. Jack adds that if Nikki comes through for them, they could be several steps ahead of Victor. Claire and Kyle team up. At their table, Claire vents to Kyle about Audra using her as a punching bag and never expecting any retaliation. She finally lost it today. He wishes they could find a way to be rid of Audra, but there isn't much leverage against someone with no friends or a job. Claire suggests that they work together to finally teach Audra a lesson. Audra has a criminal past, and they can use that to bury her. Claire is determined that Audra knows she's the one destroying her. They toast to it. But as Jack continued watching Kyle and Claire toast to vengeance, something unfamiliar stirred beneath the polished calm of his expression, a dangerous blend of resignation, fury, and a boldness he hadn't tasted since the early days of his wars with Victor, and as the faint clink of Kyle's and Claire's glasses echoed across the restaurant, Jack felt the edges of desperation tightening around him like wires. He couldn't shake Nikki's confession that she wished she could take the AI out of Victor's hands, that she feared what he would do with it, and suddenly the idea of leaning into that vulnerability, exploiting it, and striking first surged through him with electrifying clarity. Diane, however, was a storm of worry beside him. She sensed something shifting in her husband's mind, and the way his gaze never left Kyle and Claire sent her stomach twisting with dread. She warned him, under her breath, that he couldn't possibly be considering trusting Nikki again, not with everything at stake, not when Victor was poised to gut them, yet Jack's eyes narrowed with the cold focus of a man who knew that desperation demanded risk, and if taking the AI before Victor weaponized it against them was the only card they had left, then so be it, even if it meant sending Claire, unstable, wounded, newly emboldened Claire, straight into the lion's den. Across the room, Kyle leaned closer to Claire, lowering his voice as he told her he hadn't seen her like this before, fierce, unapologetic, ready to burn down anyone who crossed her, and Claire admitted that she was done letting people like Audra use her as a target. She'd been hunted, manipulated, underestimated her entire life, and every time she tried to rise above it, someone like Audra swooped in to drag her back down. But this time she wouldn't just defend herself, she would dismantle the threat entirely. Kyle squeezed her hand, promising she wouldn't be doing it alone, and for a moment the fragile beginnings of trust flickered between them like a candle in a storm, but Claire's mind was still tangled in anger, replaying the moment she wrapped her hands around Audra's throat, the way the breath drained from Audra's eyes, the way Holden's hands had trembled when he pulled her back, as if he didn't fully recognize the woman she had become. And though she didn't regret it, not one bit, she knew that retaliation wasn't enough. Audra needed to feel fear, real fear, the kind she had inflicted on everyone she had ever manipulated. Kyle agreed, adding that AUDRA'S past crimes, her scandalous blackmail schemes, her betrayals, her attempted corporate coups, they could use all of it, strategically, mercilessly, until AUDRA was crushed beneath the weight of her own reputation. The idea thrilled Claire. Revenge tasted sweet. But as she leaned into Kyle to whisper the first seeds of her plan, Jack's voice suddenly cut through the room, calling his son over. Claire straightened, wary, but Kyle squeezed her knee lightly before standing, bracing himself for whatever lecture his parents were about to deliver. Jack asked him bluntly what was going on with Claire, not about romance, but about the unmistakable look of conspiracy between them. Kyle didn't flinch. He told his father the truth. Claire had been attacked, provoked, humiliated, and she was done tolerating it. They were going to put AUDRA in her place. Diane gasped, horrified that Claire had been involved in another altercation, while Jack rubbed his temple, muttering that this was the last thing they needed when Victor was circling them like a shark. But then Jack asked the question he never would have dared to ask a year ago, "Claire, how far are you willing to go?" Claire didn't blink. She told him she wanted AUDRA stopped permanently. Not killed, not physically harmed, but exposed, stripped of any influence, rendered powerless. Diane insisted that revenge wasn't the answer, but Jack, eyes sharp, mind racing, ignored her, instead leaning in and asking something far more volatile. "What if I told you there was something AUDRA knows, something Victor knows, that we need? Something only someone with your patience could extract?" Claire stiffened, sensing the shift in the air, the subtle manipulation she recognized from a lifetime of being used by others, but Jack spoke calmly, gently, carefully, explaining that Nikki had confessed Victor's role in Arabesque's destruction and admitted she wished she could get the AI tech away from him. Diane hissed his name, warning that they couldn't drag Claire into this, but Jack continued, asking Claire whether she would consider getting close to Nikki, earning her trust, and retrieving something that could save Jabot, something Victor would never willingly surrender. Claire laughed softly, bitterly, reminding him she'd barely survived Victor's last crusade against her, but Kyle stepped forward, telling her that this wasn't about sacrificing her, it was about dismantling Victor's power before he weaponized it against them. And Claire, still fueled by the fire of her confrontation with AUDRA, still desperate to prove she wasn't a victim anymore, considered the possibility. She could infiltrate, manipulate, retrieve. She had the skills. She had the nerve. She had nothing to lose. Across town, meanwhile, AUDRA paced her suite, clutching an ice pack to her bruising neck, trembling with a combination of pain, rage, and humiliation. Holden had been right, she had poked too far, pushed too hard, but Claire's assault had shifted something inside her. She wasn't just annoyed. She wasn't even angry. She was terrified. And terror was something AUDRA worked violently to erase. She snarled to herself that Claire thought she could scare her, beat her, overwhelm her, but she had no idea how dangerous AUDRA could be when cornered. She pulled out her phone and dialed someone she never wanted to call again, a shadow from her past, someone with influence, someone who owed her a favor. She needed protection, leverage, and firepower. If Claire wanted war, AUDRA would scorch the earth. Back at the Abbott mansion later that night, Jack, Diane, Kyle, and Claire reconvened in the living room, the tension thick as Jack laid out the stakes. Victor was preparing a digital war unlike anything they'd seen, one that could wipe Jabot off the map. The only way to stop him was to take the AI before he unleashed it. Diane called the plan insane, dangerous, unethical, and reckless, everything she despised about Jack's rivalry with Victor, but Jack argued passionately that everything they'd built, everything their family stood for, was at risk. They had no choice but to hit Victor before he struck them. Kyle, surprisingly calm, told Diane that Claire wasn't being pushed into anything, she was volunteering. Claire nodded, saying this was an opportunity to reclaim power Victor had stolen from her. She would get the AI. She would help them. She wasn't afraid. But privately, in the quiet shadows of her mind, she wondered whether she was diving into another nightmare she couldn't escape. As they solidified the details of their plan, a new, fragile partnership formed, Kyle, Claire, and Jack united by desperation, ambition, and a shared enemy. Yet none of them saw the looming avalanche their decision would unleash. None of them sensed AUDRA'S counterstrike forming. None of them realized Nikki Newman, unaware of the Abbott plot, was about to make a decision that would rip open secrets none of them were prepared for. And as the night deepened, a storm gathered over Genoa City, built from vengeance, fear, and the intoxicating thrill of revenge, with Claire at its center, finally no longer a pawn, but a queen stepping into the fire.